Transport Ministry spokesperson Ayanda Allie Paine. A very good afternoon to you, Ayanda. What a time to be alive as South Africans. Really a first for many of us to be going through a lockdown period. But let's talk through the logistics of travel during this time, perhaps starting with one that is forefront for most people, the taxi usage. Who is allowed to use the taxis and at what time?
Tamia, very good afternoon to you. Good afternoon to your viewers. Thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to clarify. I think it's important to note that before we go any further, this virus was brought into South Africa by the use of transportation, aviation in particular. So we cannot underplay the importance of making sure that we get it right transport-wise. So when it comes to taxis, the reason why we have closed the taxi ranks is because we do not want to see a further spread of this virus in areas with the potential of having large numbers of people congregate there. And so the taxi ranks are closed first and foremost. The second part of what I have to say is that only those who are working in essential services will be permitted to use public transport, taxis in particular. And that will only take place between 5 a.m. and 9 a.m. in the morning to make sure that they get to work on time, and upon their return between 4 p.m. and 8 p.m. at night. And this is to try and contain the spread of the virus as much as possible.
Now, Ayanda, yes, if you are a member of the essential services, you have been given, carte blanche to travel to work and back. But there are some other instances where South Africans will be allowed to leave their homes. That's if they need to perhaps buy food or they need to go and buy their medication. Where will they be finding their taxis? Because the taxi ranks are allegedly or supposedly closed.
Indeed, they're only open just for those who are going to work, and work being essential services. But if you want to go, perhaps you live in the township and you would like to get food or other supplies, you will not be allowed to use the taxis. We're encouraging you to go to your local grocery store, your local spaza shops, your local malls. And we know that we've started to see a burgeoning of these malls in your township areas. And we're doing this because we do not want to encourage people going into taxis, because, again, that will defeat the purpose. I think it's important for us to understand, like you said in your intro, Tammy, that these are exceptional times and exceptional circumstances, and we should not try and normalize an abnormal situation. It is a lockdown. So in essence, if we are going to say to people, you want to go to the mall and you can use the taxi, what is the purpose for the lockdown then? It defeats the purpose entirely. And so we do not want people to go into taxis to go and get groceries. We know that we have permitted your spaza shops to be able to go and get stock. We've permitted the local grocery stores to go and stock up. So there will be enough food within your immediate vicinity, in the township, in those areas where you get the goods. There will be goods enough. We do not want people to move out of their immediate vicinity to go to your shops further afield or further away from where they stay, because, again, then why do we have a lockdown?
Ayanda, that is understood. What do individuals do in a situation where perhaps there's chronic medication that needs to be collected and one cannot get that from a spaza shop? What necessary documentation do they need to have to gain them access to the taxis during those particular hours?
Indeed, if someone has got a medical emergency, you can take either a doctor's note if you're going to collect chronic medication, or you can, your medical file. If you go to Baragwanath or other hospitals, you'll know that you've got a file that they give you. You can present that file and say, I'm supposed to be at the doctor at such and such a time. But also, very importantly, Tammy, I mean, what do people do if it was not lockdown? What were we going to do? If someone has got an illness, it's highly unlikely that you're going to get into a taxi and go to Baragwanath Hospital. The chances are you would look for an ambulance, and those emergency services will be operating during the lockdown. So we would continue in that case. If someone is at home they're in Pretoria somewhere, they've got a particular situation and they need to go and get medical attention urgently, they'd have to call an ambulance, and the ambulances will be working in lockdown. What we do not want to encourage is people getting onto taxis and buses and going to get groceries or even getting medical attention that way, because, again, it will not help us to flatten the curve.
And that, Ayanda, is a great alternative. Call an ambulance if you need to get any chronic medication, perhaps a service that one would not ordinarily have used. But as we said, these are not ordinary times, so there are extraordinary measures that have been put in place. The last thing, Ayanda, before I let you go, in the eventuality that one's driving license expires during this time, just a recap of what the minister said one ought to do.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've received calls from people who are saying, my driver's license or my learner's license is expiring. What will I do? It will be deemed as still permissible to use throughout the time of the lockdown. You then have a 14-day grace period after the lockdown to go then and make sure that you get your license renewed, or you sit down for your driver's test. Those who have paid already and booked and were expecting to take their tests within the lockdown period, that is still valid. Once the lockdown is suspended, you can then go and make sure that you take your test and things continue as per normal. So it's important for people not to panic. I think it's important for us to emphasize that if we do as government has urged us to do, and we stay at home, Tammy, then we will come out of this hopefully relatively unscathed. But if we continue to find ways and means to circumvent the laws that have been put in place or the regulations, we're going to find ourselves in bigger trouble than we are in right now. We look across the globe, further afield, and we're seeing that people are really buckling under the enormity and the pressure of this virus. So you can imagine us as a developing country. I think our government is doing a phenomenal job trying to curb this virus. So let us work together with our government and make sure that when this thing comes to an end, and it will, that we would not have suffered any casualties.